Hey, gamers, this is Liz Davis from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm very excited to have three special guests for this interview. I have got Neco Cockburn, Lucas Cockburn, and Alex Goss, game designers and Zenobia finalists who are about to be submitting The Porters. So how are y'all gentlemen doing today?
Good.
Doing great.
Great, yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I'm super happy to have y'all on. So for people who have not been following the Zenobia Award, what is like the summary of The Porters?
Well, it's basically a game that's based on the experiences of Black train porters in Canada in the early to mid 1900s and their eventual success in unionizing. A bit of context, Canadian rail companies had adopted a luxury sleeping car service that was based on what was being done in the United States at the time. Under this model, the companies would hire Black porters to serve the passengers who were predominantly white. And while it was one of the few jobs that Black men could get at that time, it had pretty terrible working conditions. They were expected by the companies to be smiling, subservient, wearing pristine uniforms, all those sorts of stereotypes. And then they had to rely on tips to supplement low wages. They faced racist policies, racist attitudes, and long work hours, which was a major part sort of their story in terms of working very long time without the ability to sleep or rest. And they also faced arbitrary punishment from the companies or their bosses. So with all this, with little job security, and despite all of this, they were still able to come together and unionize. So that's basically what our game's about.
Oh, that's awesome. So what got y'all interested in this topic, and what made y'all think that this was a good thing for the three of you to do together?
Well, Nico and I have been playing, we're brothers. So we've been playing board games, it feels like forever. So we kind of jumped into the modern board gaming hobby maybe like a decade or so ago. And Alex and I live in the same city, and we're part of a gaming group, and we play a lot of games together. So the gaming part of things was always cooking in the background. And I had looked at Zenobia, the first Zenobia Award in 2021. And, I think I did a concept proposal back then. So I was aware of the context. And we thought when this contest came up, I'd had an idea about train porters being a good subject for a game. In Canada, we don't hear a lot about the contributions of Black Canadians and Black immigrants to sort of the fabric of society. And so over time, I've sort of felt that bringing some of those stories to light would be really great. And so it just so happened that there's this sort of Venn diagram of, board gaming and having these guys to play with and these thoughts of designing, and that overlap with wanting to bring some of those stories to a wider audience. And it seemed like a good fit. There's been some popular media in Canada around train porters. There's a TV series, and there's a novel that came out that was quite popular. And so it was kind of in the consciousness a little bit. And we sort of looked at some of those things and did a bit more reading. I thought it was a great fit.
Awesome. And so if you're making a game about porters unionizing, what kind of mechanisms and game structure did y'all choose to kind of express something about this particular topic?
So it's a two-player game that we've got, and it's cooperative with limited communication. Basically, each player takes the role of a senior porter managing a crew of porters, and the porters will serve passengers on the train. And then in Canadian cities, they'll work to undertake union activities. And the sort of general end goal is to try to coordinate enough votes to form union chapters. So I don't know if someone else wants to go more into the mechanics, but that's sort of the overarching.
Yeah, I think there's within those stories and that history, there's some really interesting tensions that kind of emerge that also work their way into the game around, what the personal motivations are and trying to do your job and, get tips and get through the day versus the more kind of community brotherhood side of it, of getting fair treatment, getting fair wages, job security, and trying to unionize behind the scenes while not losing your job as a result of it. And so there's some really interesting tensions that come into play in the game as well.
And with the unionization part of it, the mechanisms in this, there's sort of two phases of the game. I think Neco mentioned this: the train phase, where you're actively serving passengers, and then the city phase is where you engage in some of these union activities. And so we chose to sort of model the union activities as sort of almost a hidden information type of mechanic, where there's a voting pool that you each have access to, but you only know your kind of side of the pool, because communication is sort of limited, and in fact, you have to be very, very careful about engaging in any of these activities in the open. And so what we've done is, when you are in the city phase, there's limited communication of the votes that you know, and there are ways to manipulate the votes that you have. And ultimately, as you move around the city, you're basically trying to drum up support and generate yes votes, but you will never really know the full voting tally until the end of the round.
Oh, that's super interesting. And then I guess I would be interested in knowing, how much has the game changed over the course of the Zenobia competitions? Did you start the game with Zenobia, or had you kind of already started before? And then how did the game evolve over time? Like, does it look like how it did at the start, or has it been through some dramatic change?
It's changed a lot. I would say it's changed a lot. Like we started with Zenobia, so it's a fresh design with the start of the contest, and that's one of the things that I found most interesting, was how much the game has evolved from the initial ideas and the concept proposal to sort of where it is now. So, would you guys agree? I think it's changed a lot.
Yeah. I was looking back at the design diary, and it's completely different.
Yeah, I think some of the core elements are there. The concept of porters on trains and using cards to represent that interaction, and then having the unionization. I think those concepts are in place, but yeah, how that unfolded is very different now than where we started.
Yeah, we tried a lot of different mechanisms, and I feel like with every playtest we did, it was just generate a billion ideas, and we playtest those and generate a billion more, and yeah, it was quite the process.
Yeah, so I always like to ask this, just because they say kill your darlings, so I want to know what people's darlings are. Was there anything that you really liked for the game and that you kind of wanted to get in there that you had to cut in order for the game to work better?
I can't really.
Go ahead, Neco.
I was going to say that I can't. I know that we killed a lot. As to whether, like, there were ideas that I feel I had that just never sort of got off the ground, but we did a lot of definite trimming and cutting, and that was almost like a real major part of our process, was trying to get the game streamlined as much as possible. And because we wanted to try to make something that was had some elegance to it and whatnot, so we were constantly cutting and cutting. I can't think off the top of my head about anything major that I can think of, but yeah.
Well, we were cutting initially, I conceived my conception of the game was that it was going to be like a semi-co-op game, because I wanted to sort of have a bit of competition to highlight the sort of agency of the porters in their own lives, and the fact that they weren't just workers on a train. But we couldn't really get that off the ground, and so we ultimately went to a co-op game. So that idea of a semi-co-op really had to be killed, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the kind of collaborative nature of the group of us working on this game as well was really exciting. And I think that kind of helped you kill your favorite ideas. I remember one time just showing up with, I brought my notebook in and we were trying to figure out the city unionizing phase. And I think I had like 6 drawings of different concepts. I was like, I really think this one, like number 3 is gold. And went in and was like, it's not going to work. I'm like, wait. But like, what if we do it this way? But it was really that kind of back and forth and discussing the ideas really kind of allowed you to work through it and come to an acceptance of, okay, yeah, maybe that's like interesting for me, but maybe it's not really a good fit for this game. Yeah.
So speaking of collaboration, so Neco, Lucas, y'all live in different cities, and Lucas and Alex, y'all play together. So you see each other in person a lot. How did y'all manage to maintain like good communication with each other and look at prototypes and all of that across a distance? Did you do some of this in person, or were you designing partially online?
So most of it was, well, I guess we did a combination of it. Alex and I did a lot of play testing in person, just with note cards and, very, very, very rough prototypes. And then we would loop Neco in with all sorts of strange phone camera setups above the table and that kind of thing. So we would kind of all sort of play test together. And once we developed it further and actually got like an online sort of mod going, then it was much easier to play test frequently and be able to sort of collaborate that way. And then a lot of it was just, brainstorming, and we have a group WhatsApp chat going that, we just send ideas back and forth. So it seemed to work out okay.
Makes sense. So as the time of this conversation, we've got, it's what, like 10 days until you got to submit this thing, like the final. So how much change is happening for your game in this period? What do you got to get done before deadline? No one wants to fess up.
Yeah. so we were, yeah, we got some really good feedback from the last stage. And some of the feedback between the reviewers was a little bit conflicting, and we're still trying to sort of piece together how much we want to change in the game sort of wholesale. We are going to make some changes with respect to clarity, like on the game board itself, and little prompts to help people remember some of the slightly trickier aspects of the rules. I think the core of the game is going to stay pretty much as is for now. From our experience designing, making one change could potentially cause a lot of knock-on effects and, potentially break the game in ways that we haven't been able to adequately test. And so there's going to be a few changes that are substantive, and then the rest are going to be, I think, helpful for the player experience.
And so this kind of leads to the question of, it sounds like you've got like a pretty cohesive core to your game, that you've come a long way to get there. When people play the porters, what is the number one thing you want them to notice or come away with after playing your work?
I mean, I think for me, it's sort of bringing to light the various elements of what the porters went through, and sort of to marvel at the fact that they were able to organize under such pressure and with such high stakes, and actually get enough people on board to do that. I think some of the design choices we've made will serve to sort of drive that home. I mentioned earlier sort of some of the dehumanizing aspects of the job. We hadn't really mentioned in this that the porters, the whole system that was done in the United States was sort of led by an entrepreneur named George Pullman, and the porters ended up just being called George rather than being using their given names while they were working on the trains. So that's obviously very dehumanizing. One of the little mechanics we worked into the game on the train basically was to have the cards tuck when you serve passengers, and each card has the porter's face on it. And when that's tucked under the passenger, it's sort of, you no longer see the porter, right? So little things like that, I think, will hopefully sort of cause players to sort of pause and think, like, wow, like this was pretty harsh.
And we've tried to balance the game so that it is a difficult game, to sort of model some of the difficulty. And we tried to bring some themes through the mechanics that kind of echo those things that Neco was talking about. So like fatigue was a major part of the story. And so you're generating fatigue every time you're moving to serve passengers on the train and moving in the city to do the union activities. And so what we're hoping is that people will have a bit of that feeling of, there's not enough time, there's not enough energy to do everything that we need to get done. And that creates a lot of tension there. And with that said, I think we also really wanted to focus on making a game that we wanted to play. And so we tried to make a game with relatively lighter rules overhead, but a lot of interesting decisions to make along the way and to make sort of collaboratively. And so we think that, I think that the mechanics that we've chosen and just the style of game that we have is a pretty fun and interesting game to play. Like the subject matter can be a little heavy, but ultimately I think the game is quite an enjoyable game, a game to play.
Yeah, and I would just add, I would hope that people will kind of come away from the experience of playing the game with maybe a deeper understanding of some of the contributions Black Porter's made to building Canada and Canada's history, and maybe some empathy as well of what that kind of tension felt like, what some of those challenges and struggles looked like at the time.
Excellent. And so y'all actually hit on something I think is super interesting. So the game has some pretty heavy themes, and you have to really confront a harsh reality when you're doing a game on a historical topic like this. But it's also clear that y'all took consideration for making the game a fun and enjoyable experience as a game. How did you balance that? And are there times where you decided to pull back or deliberately make the player more uncomfortable? Either way, to kind of get the point across. Like, how do you balance it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we tried to balance it, I think we used the mechanics as sort of a nod, like Neco's example of, the porter essentially becoming faceless as they're serving the passenger, as a reference to that idea of just being called George or boy and not actually being seen as a human. We are trying to echo that in the mechanics of the game itself, without having it sort of like it's there, and we've made mention of it in the rules so people can see how the mechanics tie to the theme. But it's not right. We're not trying to sort of hit you in the face with it. I think it's there to be discovered and to sort of pique interest and understand a little bit, while still, being able to enjoy the mechanics of the game itself. And, we tried to, there's little things in the game, like when you're doing the initial round setup, you pull a domino from a bag to determine which berths are empty on the train. And so little nods like that to dominoes, which are a big part of like Caribbean culture. There are lots of Caribbean Black immigrants that came to serve. We tried to have a few sort of light touches like that to bring the theme out and have it not feel so heavy.
And I think too, the end goal of the game, I think we felt would be enjoyable as well. That sense of accomplishment, overcoming a challenge of the railway company, forming the union together cooperatively, that end goal should be enjoyable as well, even if the kind of struggles along the way are a bit, they're not always enjoyable in the same way.
Perfect. All right. So this sounds like a great game. I honestly can't wait to play this. I'm very, very curious about what this is going to look like in its final form. But we're running out of time, so I'll ask you the softy questions. What games have y'all been playing recently that you've really, really enjoyed?
I've had Fields of Arle out. I've been playing a lot of that. and my wife and I have been playing Guild of Merchant Explorers. That's our most recent game that we've gotten to the table, and quite enjoying that.
Yeah, I've actually got Paper Tales sitting on the table in front of me. I usually grab a game and sort of play it for a week, and that was this week's game, so that's what I've been playing.
I haven't played too much recently, so
Excommunicated. Okay. All right. Well, what's a fave then?
oh, I'm a fan of Dune.
Which one?
Dune, Uprising.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then if y'all want, do y'all have social media where people can follow you and check out your work online?
I do not.
Nor do I.
Sorry, no.
All right. So everyone, you're going to have to know these men of mystery through their work. But I can be found everywhere as Beyond Solitaire. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. This is fascinating, and I'm very, very excited about the Porters. Congrats so much on making it to the finals, and it sounds like this is a great entry.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
it's great.
All right, everybody. Please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, and most of all, happy gaming.